How the Light Gets In is the Institute of Art and Ideas' unique festival, combining days full of talks and debates in philosophy, politics, arts and science, with evenings full of music and dance. Get your tickets for the world's largest music and philosophy festival at HowTheLightGetsIn.org.
Gratitude has now been studied by positive psychologists, and some of you are probably aware of the positive psychology movement. It's been going for 20 or 30 years. And this is a movement among psychologists who are trying to find out what makes people happy. What makes it a radical departure from traditional psychology is that most of it was about what makes people miserable, because psychotherapists, after all, mostly see people who are miserable. And so there's a lot of studies on what makes people miserable. But the positive psychology movement set out to find out what makes people happy. They started with a series of studies in which people had beepers which went off at random times, and they had to write down what they were doing and how happy they felt on a 1 to 9 scale. And it turned out that people throughout the day, their level of happiness varied, of course, but the activities they were involved in when they were happy were very varied. Sometimes when they were really absorbed in their work, sometimes when they're having a great conversation, sometimes when they're making love, sometimes when they're dancing or singing, sometimes when they're playing games. The common thing with all these was that they were in a state of flow, and that's what made them feel happy. What made them feel unhappy was boredom, disconnection, separation, isolation, disconnection from what's happening. As part of this study, one of the things that turned out to be related to happiness was gratitude. It turned out that people who are happy are very often very grateful people. So the skeptics said, well, of course they're grateful. They're grateful because they're happy. So they wanted to find out whether it was, well, they're grateful because they're happy, or are they happy because they're grateful? So they did experiments, being scientists, to find out. And they did some simple, straightforward experiments. They divided groups of people into 3 samples at random. One lot of people wrote down all the things that had made them miserable in the previous week. Another lot just wrote down a story from the previous week. And the third group, the gratitude group, wrote down what had made them feel happy and what they felt grateful for in the previous week. And the people who were recalled things that had made them happy, for which they felt grateful, were measurably happier for days afterwards. The exercise that made the biggest difference to them was what they called the gratitude letter, where they asked them to think of someone who'd helped them in their life who they'd never properly acknowledged, sometimes a teacher, sometimes a family member, write a letter expressing their gratitude, and then go to that person and read the letter to them. And when they did that, these people were much happier for at least 2 months afterwards. So what they showed is that gratitude is a very simple practice. It's present in every single religious tradition, giving thanks for what we have and all the blessings in our lives. And in a sense, it's obvious that it's something that people have always done, and it puts you in a flow, because if you're grateful, you acknowledge what's come to you, you give thanks, it continues the flow. The opposite of gratitude is a sense of entitlement or taking things for granted. And it turns out that people who are grateful are much more popular with others than people who take things for granted, feel entitled and complain all the time. Well, that's not very surprising either. But these findings of positive psychology, in a sense, reinforce the obvious. But in the modern world, unless things have the imprimatur of science, the seal of scientific approval, people don't take them so seriously.
Get your tickets for the world's largest music and philosophy festival at HowTheLightGetsIn.org.